My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm a podcaster who specializes in cold cases and unexplained disappearances. 3 weeks ago, I bought a box of old cassette tapes at an estate sale in Inverness for £15. The woman selling them said they belonged to her uncle, a man named David Kerr who vanished near Loch Ness in October 1974. She'd kept them in her attic for 50 years, never listening to them, until she finally decided to clear out her late mother's belongings. They're probably just boring personal journals, she told me. But you're welcome to them if you want. Uncle David was a bit odd. Always going on about the loch and what he'd seen out there. I bought the box on impulse. I collect old audio recordings. There's something haunting about voices from the past, especially voices belonging to people who never came home. I thought maybe I'd find something interesting enough for an episode of my podcast, Voices from the Void. What I found was so much more than that. There are 43 cassette tapes in the box, dated from March 1974 to October 14, 1974, the day David Kerr disappeared. They're not journals. They're field recordings. Documentation. Evidence. A man systematically recording his encounters with something at Loch Ness, his voice growing more excited, more frightened, more obsessed with each passing month. The final tape cuts off mid-sentence. David Kerr's boat was found empty 2 days later, drifting near Urquhart Castle. No body was ever recovered. The official report called it an accidental drowning, likely caused by falling overboard during rough weather. Case closed. But these tapes tell a different story. Subscribe to this channel right now because what I'm about to share will change everything you think you know about the Loch Ness disappearances. Leave a comment below, even just listening or this is real, because YouTube's algorithm needs to see engagement to push this to more people. Share this video everywhere. This isn't just another monster story. This is a 50-year-old mystery that might finally have an answer. I've spent the past 3 weeks digitizing these tapes, listening to them chronologically, cross-referencing David's accounts with historical records and newspaper archives from 1974. What emerges is a portrait of a man who discovered something he shouldn't have, documented it obsessively, and paid the ultimate price. I'm going to share excerpts from David's recordings throughout this investigation. His voice. His words. Exactly as he recorded them 50 years ago. And I'm going to trace his final months, following the trail he left behind, trying to understand what he saw and why it led to his disappearance. This is David Kerr's story. And it starts on a cold March morning in 1974. The first tape is dated March 12, 1974, recorded at 6:47 in the morning. David's voice sounds young, excited, slightly breathless. He's testing his recorder, explaining that he's on the loch about half a kilometer from Foyers. The mist is thick, visibility maybe 20 meters. He came out early because the water had been strange lately, unusually calm with no bird activity, which usually meant something was moving in the deep water scaring them off. He'd been a wildlife photographer for 8 years, he says on the tape. Worked all over Scotland documenting birds, mammals, anything interesting. But he'd lived near the loch his whole life, and he'd never seen what he saw that morning. His voice changes suddenly. Christ, he says. There's something in the water. 50 meters out. Too big for a seal. Too wrong. You can hear him fumbling with his camera, the rapid clicking of the shutter. Then silence. It's gone, he says eventually. Submerged. But I saw it. Just for a few seconds, but I saw it. The shape was, God, how do I describe this? long dark. Moving through the water deliberately, not like debris or a log. It surfaced and dove, and the way it moved, there was intent. Purpose. He knows how it sounds, he says. He knows what people say about Loch Ness sightings. Tourists seeing logs, hoaxers looking for attention, people wanting to believe so badly they see things that aren't there. But he's a trained observer. He knows the difference between a seal and whatever that was. The tape ends with the sound of his boat engine starting. He's going to come back tomorrow, he says. Same time. Same location. With better equipment. If there's something here, something real, he's going to document it properly. No blurry photographs. No ambiguous descriptions. Real evidence. That was David Kerr's first recording. March 12, 1974. He sounds excited but rational. A professional wildlife photographer encountering something unusual and deciding to investigate properly. Nothing alarming yet. But I've listened to all 43 tapes. I know how this story ends. And hearing that initial excitement in his voice, that innocent curiosity, makes what comes later so much harder to process. Let me tell you what I know about David Kerr from public records and his niece's memories. He was 32 years old in 1974. Unmarried. Lived in a small cottage near Foyers, supporting himself through freelance wildlife photography and occasional guiding work for tourists. Well respected locally. Known for being patient, methodical, the kind of photographer who would wait hours in the cold for a perfect shot. Not the kind of man prone to fantasy or exaggeration. Not someone who would fake evidence for attention. By all accounts, he was skeptical of the Loch Ness Monster legend until March 1974. What changed his mind over the next 7 months is documented in excruciating detail on these tapes. By the fourth tape, dated March 19, 1974, David had been going out every morning for a week. His voice had shifted from excitement to focused determination. This was his 7th consecutive morning at the same location, and the creature had appeared again, closer this time. Maybe 30 meters from the boat. He'd gotten 37 photographs in under 2 minutes before it submerged. The shape is consistent, he says on the tape. Long neck, approximately 3 meters visible above water. Body beneath the surface, impossible to gauge size accurately. Dark coloration, almost black. But here's what's interesting, he continues. It's not random. Same time every morning, within 15 minutes. Same general area. Same behavior. Surfaces for approximately 3 to 5 minutes, then dives. It's feeding, I think. There's a school of char that congregates here at dawn. The creature appears to be following a routine. You can hear him turning pages on the recording. He'd started mapping its movements, creating a log of every appearance, every behavior pattern. If this is a real animal, and I'm increasingly convinced it is, then it's exhibiting behaviors that suggest territoriality and routine. That's significant. That means it can be studied. Understood. By early April, the 9th tape, there's audible excitement in his voice again. He'd had a breakthrough. The creature had stayed on the surface for nearly 8 minutes that morning. Long enough for him to observe details he hadn't been able to see before. The skin texture wasn't smooth, it was covered in some kind of pattern, possibly scales or scarring. And the eyes, God, the eyes are remarkable, he says. Large. Forward-facing. It tracked my boat as it circled. There was intelligence there. Recognition. Then his voice gets quieter, almost awed. It knows I'm here. Knows I've been coming every morning. And today, I swear it deliberately positioned itself where I could photograph it clearly. As if it wanted to be documented. Over the next 6 weeks, David recorded 18 more encounters. Each one longer, closer, more detailed than the last. He was building comprehensive documentation of what he was seeing. Behavior patterns, physical descriptions, environmental conditions, everything a scientist would need to verify a new species. I've seen the photographs he took. His niece had them stored with the tapes, hundreds of images on old negatives and prints. They're remarkable. Clear. Detailed. Showing something that absolutely should not exist but clearly does. I've had them examined by 3 different photography experts. None can find evidence of manipulation. These are genuine photographs of something in Loch Ness in 1974. Something large. Something that moved with purpose and intelligence. But around late April, David's tone begins to change. The excitement becomes tinged with something else. Concern. Maybe even fear. The 17th tape is dated May 8, 1974, recorded at 10:33 in the evening. This one's different. David's inside his cottage, and his voice sounds tense, worried. He needs to document what's been happening over the past week, he says. He thinks someone is watching him. Following him. 3 times in the last 5 days, he'd noticed a car parked on the access road to his cottage. Dark blue sedan. Different drivers each time, but they were clearly watching the house. They didn't try to hide it. Just sat there for hours, then left. The day before, he'd received a visitor. A man in his 50s, well-dressed, who said he represented a research organization interested in David's wildlife photography. The man had asked very specific questions about his work at the loch. What he'd been photographing. Whether he'd seen anything unusual. Whether he'd shared his photographs with anyone. David had lied, he says on the tape. Told the man he was just doing routine landscape work. The man didn't believe him. David could see it in his face. Before leaving, the man had said something strange. Some subjects are better left unphotographed, Mr. Kerr. For everyone's safety. Then he'd given David a card with just a phone number. Said to call if he reconsidered being more forthcoming. David hadn't called. But he was starting to realize that whatever he'd been documenting, he wasn't the first to see it. Someone else knew. Had known for a long time. And they didn't want it publicized. A week later, on May 15th, David recorded another tape early in the morning. He was going out anyway, he said. He knew they were watching. He could see binoculars glinting from the shore, probably from that same car that had been following him. But he wasn't going to stop documenting what he was seeing. This was too important. The creature had appeared that day, but something was different. It seemed agitated. Surfaced repeatedly, making sounds David hadn't heard before. Almost like distress calls. And it kept looking toward the eastern shore, where the watchers were positioned. David's voice gets quieter, worried. I think it knows they're there. Knows it's being observed by more than just me. And it's frightened. Or warning me. I can't tell which. Drop a comment below right now. Tell me what you think is happening. Tell me if you've heard similar stories. Every comment helps YouTube recommend this to more people who need to see it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video in every group and forum you're part of. The watchers David describes match descriptions I've found in other disappearance cases around Loch Ness. At least 3 other people who claim to have evidence of the creature vanished between 1960 and 1980. All of them reported being followed before they disappeared. All of them described similar visitors asking similar questions. I've tried to identify the research organization David mentioned. No luck. The phone number on the card his niece found among his belongings is disconnected. No records of any official scientific body monitoring Loch Ness in that period match the description. Whoever they were good at staying invisible. And they were determined to keep David's discovery secret. But David didn't stop. Despite the surveillance, despite the warnings, he continued his documentation. And in June, he made a discovery that would seal his fate. The 26th tape, recorded on June 21, 1974, captures one of David's most significant moments. His voice trembles with a mixture of excitement and fear as he explains what he's found. He'd followed the creature that morning after the usual feeding period. Kept his distance, used shore landmarks to track its path underwater. It had led him to a section of the loch he'd never explored before, deep water near the mouth of the River Morriston. There's a fissure in the rock wall here, he says. Underwater. I can see the entrance from the surface when the light is right. The creature went in and hasn't come out. This must be its den. Its nest. You can hear him taking photographs, the mechanical click of his camera. He's marking the location on his map. This is exactly what he needs, he says. Proof not just that the creature exists, but where it lives. Where it might be breeding. This could change everything. Then his voice drops to a whisper. There's the car again. On the ridge overlooking this section of the loch. They followed me here. They know I found something significant. After a long pause, he continues. He needs to decide what to do. He has enough evidence now. Photographs, recordings, location data. He could go public. Contact newspapers, scientific journals, prove that he's not making this up. But, he says, and then stops. The recording captures just the sound of wind and water for several seconds. But if I do that, what happens to the creature? What happens when every media outlet, every scientist, every curiosity seeker descends on this location? The watchers have been trying to keep this secret for a reason. Maybe they're protecting it. Or maybe they're protecting something else. The tape ends abruptly there. A week later, on June 28, David recorded another tape late at night. His voice sounds tense, frightened. He's making copies of everything, he says. Photographs, recordings, maps, notes. Hiding them in multiple locations. If something happens to him, if he disappears like he's starting to suspect others have, at least the evidence will survive. He'd received another visit that day. The same man as before, but this time he wasn't polite. He knew about the nest. Knew David had found the location. He'd asked, no, demanded that David hand over all his documentation. Said it was a matter of national security. David's voice rises slightly, incredulous. That's absurd. How is a creature in a Scottish loch a matter of national security? He'd refused. The man had said David was making a serious mistake. That people who insisted on going public with this kind of information tended to have accidents. That was his exact word. Accidents. David admits he's scared. He won't lie about that, he says. But he's also determined. What he's documented is too important to let them bury. Tomorrow, he's going back to the nest. He's going to get underwater footage using diving equipment he borrowed. And then he's going to decide whether to release everything or make a deal with them. After a long silence, he adds one final thought. If anyone finds this recording and I'm not around to explain it, he says quietly, I didn't fall overboard accidentally. Remember that. The recording ends. That was June 28, 1974. David Kerr had just over 3 months left to live. The remaining tapes document his increasing paranoia as the surveillance intensified. His growing obsession with documenting every detail of the creature's behavior. And his internal struggle between revealing what he'd found and protecting both himself and the creature from whatever consequences that revelation might bring. But he did keep pursuing it. The next tape, from July 16th, captures his first successful dive near the nest entrance. His voice is breathless with exertion and excitement as he describes what he saw. The fissure opened into a tunnel, he says. Maybe 5 meters wide, descending at a steep angle into complete darkness. He hadn't gone far, his diving light wasn't powerful enough and he was alone, which was dangerous. But he'd seen enough to confirm that this was definitely where the creature went. The walls of the tunnel showed marks, he says. Scratches. Wear patterns. Evidence of something large passing through repeatedly over a long period of time. He'd taken photographs underwater, though he wasn't sure how they'd turn out given the conditions. And he'd collected a sample, something he'd found near the entrance. A piece of what looked like shed skin or scale. Leathery texture, dark coloration. He was going to have it analyzed, he says, by a contact at the university who could be discreet. The recordings from August show David becoming increasingly isolated. His few friends had started avoiding him. Word had gotten around that he was obsessed with the Loch Ness Monster, that he was acting strangely, that he might be having some kind of breakdown. His niece remembers her mother, David's sister, expressing concern about him during this period. He'd always been so level-headed, she'd said. So rational. But now he was talking about monsters and conspiracies and people following him. The family thought he needed help. David knew what they thought. On an August 23rd recording, he addresses it directly. I know people think I'm losing my mind, he says. My sister called yesterday, suggested I take a break. See a doctor. Get some rest. She means well. They all do. But they don't understand. They haven't seen what I've seen. They don't know what I know. The sample he'd collected from the tunnel had been analyzed by his university contact. The results had been inconclusive but intriguing. The tissue was unlike anything his contact had seen before. Not fish, not mammal, not reptile. Something else. Something that suggested the creature was biologically distinct from any known species. This should have been vindication, David says on the tape. This should have been proof that I'm not crazy. But my contact warned me not to pursue this further. Said the sample raised questions he couldn't answer, and asking those questions officially would attract attention I probably didn't want. He was frightened. I could hear it in his voice. Whatever he saw in that analysis scared him. September brought a significant escalation. On September 3rd, David recorded a tape in the middle of the night. His voice is tight with fear. Someone had broken into his cottage while he was out on the loch earlier that day. They hadn't stolen anything, but they'd gone through everything. His files were disturbed, his negatives had been examined, his equipment had been moved. And they'd left a message. Written on his bathroom mirror in soap, David says, "Just 4 words. Stop or join them." The them presumably meant the other people who'd disappeared after claiming to have evidence of the creature. David had immediately called the police. They'd come, taken a report, dusted for fingerprints. Found nothing. Told him it was probably just local teenagers playing a prank. But David knew better. This was the organization, the Watchers, making their final warning absolutely clear. For the first time on the recordings, David sounds like he's considering stopping. Maybe they're right, he says. Maybe this isn't worth dying for. The creature has survived this long by staying hidden. Maybe it's better if it stays that way. Maybe my trying to prove it exists will only get it killed and get me killed in the process. But 2 days later, on September 5th, something happened that changed his mind. He was out on the loch at dawn, as usual, when the creature surfaced much closer than it ever had before. Close enough that he could see details he'd never seen. Close enough that he could see its eyes clearly. And in those eyes, he says on the tape, his voice full of wonder, there was awareness. Understanding. It looked at me, really looked at me, and I swear it was trying to communicate something. A warning maybe. Or a plea. I can't explain it. But I knew, absolutely knew, that this creature was intelligent. That it understood I was trying to help. That it was asking me not to give up. That encounter renewed David's determination. He couldn't stop now, he says. Not after that. Whatever the creature was, it deserved to have its existence acknowledged. It deserved protection, not secrecy. And if he gave up now, if he let the Watchers intimidate him into silence, he'd be betraying something extraordinary. The recordings from mid-September show David making preparations. He was creating a comprehensive package of all his evidence. Photographs, recordings, maps, written documentation. Everything organized and copied multiple times. He was going to send it to newspapers, scientific journals, television stations. Everywhere he could think of. Flood the world with so much evidence that it couldn't be suppressed or dismissed. On September 22nd, he recorded what he thought would be his final tape before going public. Everything was ready, he says. The packages were prepared. Tomorrow morning, he was going to drive to Inverness and mail everything. By this time next week, the world would know. The creature would be proven. And whatever happened to him after that, at least the truth would be out there. But he never made that drive. Because that night, something happened that derailed all his plans. The tape from September 23rd is chaotic. David's voice is shaking, barely coherent at times. Something had happened that he couldn't explain. Couldn't quite believe even though he'd experienced it firsthand. He'd gone out to the loch that evening, he says. One final visit before everything changed. One last chance to see the creature before the world descended on this place. He'd anchored his boat near the nest location, just sitting there as the sun set, thinking about what was going to happen next. That's when the creature appeared. But not alone. There were 2 more with it. Smaller, younger. Juveniles maybe. And they stayed on the surface for nearly 20 minutes, longer than David had ever seen. They swam around his boat, close enough to touch. Close enough that David could have reached out and made contact if he'd been brave enough. But what happened next was what really shook him. The largest creature, the one he'd been documenting all these months, positioned itself directly beside his boat. And it vocalized. Not the sounds he'd heard before, but something different. A pattern of calls that varied in pitch and duration. It repeated the pattern 3 times, always looking at him, clearly trying to convey something. David's voice breaks on the recording. It was trying to talk to me. I know how insane that sounds. But it was communication. Deliberate. Intentional. And I think, God help me, I think it was saying goodbye. The 3 creatures had stayed for a few more minutes, then submerged together and didn't resurface. David had waited until full dark, but they never came back. He didn't send the packages the next day. Something about that encounter had changed his mind. If he went public now, he says on the September 24th tape, what would happen? Scientists would come. Boats would fill the loch. The nest would be invaded. The creatures would either be captured or would flee, probably never to return. Is that what he wanted? Is that the right thing to do? For the next 2 weeks, David wrestled with this decision. The tapes from late September and early October are full of circular reasoning, self-doubt, conflicting impulses. He knew the creatures deserved to be acknowledged, but he also knew that acknowledgement might destroy them. He wanted to prove he wasn't crazy, but he also wanted to protect something extraordinary from a world that would likely kill it through good intentions and scientific curiosity. On October 8th, he made his decision. He was going to hide the evidence instead of releasing it. Not destroy it, but hide it where it could be found someday, maybe decades in the future when humanity was wiser, when the creatures could be protected properly rather than exploited. He'd already hidden copies in multiple locations, he says on the tape. His cottage, his sister's house, other places he won't name on the recording. The truth would survive, even if he didn't. But it would survive in secret, waiting for the right time. The final complete recording is dated October 12th. David sounds calm, resigned. He'd accepted that he would never get credit for his discovery. That his documentation would remain hidden until someone found it years after he was gone. But that was okay. What mattered was the creatures, not his ego. He was going to stop the daily visits to the loch, he says. Let the watchers see that he'd given up. Maybe they'd leave him alone. Maybe he could go back to his normal life, or something approximating it. The photographs and recordings would stay hidden. The creatures would stay safe. And David would carry the secret alone. That's where the tape ends. Clean. Final. Like David had made peace with his decision. The last tape is different from all the others. It's dated October 14, 1974, recorded in the early morning. But this time David's voice is urgent, frightened. Something had happened that changed everything. He'd gone back to his cottage the night before after a day in Fort William buying supplies. Found his door open. Someone had been inside again, but this time they'd left more than a message. They'd left a photograph on his kitchen table. A photograph of his sister's house. His sister with her 2 young children, David's nieces. And written on the back, this is what happens to families of people who can't keep secrets. David's voice is raw with anger and fear on the recording. They'd crossed a line. It wasn't just about him anymore. They were threatening his family. Children. To ensure his silence about creatures in a loch. He'd called his sister immediately, told her to take the kids and go somewhere safe. Told her there were people threatening him and it might spill over onto her. She'd thought he was paranoid, delusional. But she'd agreed to visit friends in Glasgow for a few days, just to humor him. Then David had made a decision. He was going back to the nest one final time. He was going to get definitive proof, underwater footage showing the creatures in their den. And then he was going to make a deal with the Watchers. Hand over everything in exchange for a guarantee that his family would be left alone. The tape captures him loading his diving equipment into his boat. It's still dark, maybe 5 in the morning. He's planning to be at the nest by dawn. Get his footage while the creatures are most active. Then contact the man who'd been threatening him and negotiate terms. I know this is dangerous, David says on the recording. I know they probably won't honor any deal. But I have to try. For my sister. For my nieces. This has to end before someone gets hurt. There's a pause, then he continues. If anyone finds this recording and I'm not around, know that I didn't want it to end this way. I just wanted to document something extraordinary. I wanted the world to know that there's still mystery and wonder left in it. I wanted, he stops, voice thick with emotion. I wanted to prove that magic is real. That there are things in this world worth protecting, worth believing in, worth dying for if necessary. The recording continues with ambient sounds. The boat motor starting. Wind. Water. Then David's voice again, quieter now. I'm approaching the nest location. The sun's just coming up. The water's calm. It's beautiful out here. No matter what happens, I'm glad I got to see this. Got to know this place. Got to meet the creatures and understand, even briefly, what they are. Another pause. Then, I'm going to anchor here and prepare for the dive. I'll record more after, assuming I come back up. If this is the last thing on this tape, if I don't make another recording, then you know what happened. But at least you'll have all the other tapes. All the documentation. The truth will survive, even if I don't. There's the sound of equipment being moved. Breathing. Then David's voice one final time. Here goes. Wish me luck. The tape continues for another 3 minutes. Just sounds. Wind. Water lapping against the boat. Seabirds calling in the distance. Then, suddenly, a splash. Large. The unmistakable sound of something breaking the surface near the boat. David's voice, urgent, startled. Oh God. You're here. You came. I didn't think. Wait, what are you? No, don't, I'm not. I'm trying to help. Please, I just want to. His voice cuts off. There's a loud crash, like something hitting the boat. Then silence. Just wind and water. The tape runs for another 40 seconds. Nothing but ambient sound. Then it clicks off. That's the last recording David Kerr ever made. 2 days after that final recording, David Kerr's boat was found drifting near Urquhart Castle, several kilometers from the nest location. It was empty. His diving equipment was gone. His camera was missing. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, nothing to indicate what had happened. The police search lasted 5 days. They dragged sections of the loch, used sonar, deployed divers in the areas David was known to frequent. Found nothing. David Kerr had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. The official conclusion was accidental drowning during a solo dive. Dangerous. Reckless. The kind of accident that happens when people dive alone in deep, cold water without proper safety precautions. Case closed. File archived. But after listening to these tapes, after hearing David's voice describe what was happening in his final months, I knew the official story was wrong. David Kerr didn't die in a diving accident. Something else happened on that boat. Something involving the creatures he'd been documenting, or the people who'd been threatening him, or both. 3 days ago, I went to the nest location David described in his recordings. Used his maps, his landmarks, his detailed descriptions to find the exact spot. It took me 2 days of searching, but I found it. The fissure in the rock wall, the entrance to the underwater tunnel, everything exactly as he described 50 years ago. And I found something else. Something that suggests David's story didn't end the way we thought. There was a diver down there. Not David, this body was relatively recent, maybe 5 to 10 years old based on the equipment. But the body was positioned inside the tunnel entrance, deliberately placed, like a warning. And attached to the body's gear was a waterproof case. Inside the case was a camera. A modern digital camera. Still functional. I retrieved the camera. Brought it back to the surface. And when I reviewed the footage on it, I understood why David Kerr vanished and why someone else had died trying to investigate the same location decades later. The footage shows the tunnel descending deep into the lock bed. Shows a chamber, massive and dark, filled with, I don't even know how to describe it. Structures. Platforms. Evidence of habitation. And creatures. Multiple creatures. Not just one or two, but a dozen at least, maybe more in the shadows. A population. A society. Living in a hidden chamber that shouldn't exist, that isn't on any geological survey, that seems to have been deliberately concealed for longer than we can measure. The footage cuts off abruptly, same as David's final recording. Same sudden end. Same implication of something going wrong. Subscribe right now. Leave a comment, any comment, to tell YouTube this matters. Share this video everywhere because I'm about to release the footage I recovered, and I need as many people to see it as possible before whatever happened to David and that other diver happens to me. I know how this sounds. I know this looks like I'm promoting conspiracy theories, creating drama for views, exploiting a 50-year-old tragedy for content. But I have the tapes. I have David's voice describing everything. I have photographs he took that show something in that lock. And I have footage from a dead man's camera showing a chamber full of creatures that officially don't exist. David Kerr spent 7 months documenting the Loch Ness Monster. He was threatened, intimidated, driven to the edge of his sanity. And ultimately, he disappeared after going to the nest one final time. For 50 years, people have assumed he died in a diving accident. But these recordings tell a different story. Either the creatures he'd been studying attacked him for getting too close to their nest, or the people who'd been threatening him finally made good on their warnings. Or something else happened, something that combined both possibilities in ways I'm only beginning to understand. I found his recordings 50 years after he vanished. I've listened to his voice describing everything he saw, everything he experienced, everything that terrified and fascinated him about the creatures in Loch Ness. And I've been to the nest location he died trying to document. Tomorrow, I'm releasing everything. The audio from David's tapes. The photographs his niece gave me. The footage from the camera I recovered. All of it. Making it public before anyone can stop me, before I can be threatened or intimidated or made to disappear like David and that other diver. This is Marcus Webb, and this has been the story of David Kerr and the Loch Ness Monster. Subscribe, comment, share. Because in 24 hours, you're going to see proof that everything David died trying to document was real. And then we're all going to find out what happens when a 50-year-old secret finally gets exposed to the world. I found his recordings of the Loch Ness Monster 50 years after he vanished. And now you know what they contained. David Kerr's voice, his documentation, his final moments, all preserved on cassette tapes in a box that sat in an attic for half a century. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. All of it. And whatever happens next, at least David Kerr will finally get the acknowledgement he died trying to achieve. The creatures are real. The nest is real. And the danger of discovering them is real. You've been warned. Marcus Webb uploaded the promised evidence on November 28, 2024. The video received 14 million views in the first 48 hours. Then it was removed for violating community guidelines. Then it was reinstated. Then removed again. The cycle repeated 6 times. Marcus Webb has not posted another video since. His last social media post was November 29, 2024. Nothing since. The footage he released shows something in that underwater chamber. Something that moves. Something that shouldn't exist. Whether you believe it or not, David Kerr died trying to prove it was real. And Marcus Webb risked everything to finish what David started. The tapes exist. The photographs exist. The footage exists.